Welcome to Sounds of Resistance channel. Vladimir Putin's extreme actions in the war between Ukraine and Russia draws the reactions of the whole world. Especially last week, the firing of hundreds of Putin's missiles at Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure has angered many countries. Poland is one of the countries that makes the most effort and help for Ukraine. Poland hosts millions of Ukrainian citizens and supports Ukraine with all its means. In addition, due to the tensions on the border between Poland and Russia, Poland is the only country that reacted most strongly to Putin. Many of Poland's headquarters on the Russian border and its tens of thousands of soldiers are constantly on the lookout for a possible Russian attack. Poland is the most important military force in the Eastern Bloc of the North Atlantic Alliance. The U.S. Army has more than 10,000 soldiers, one tank division consisting of M1 Abrams tanks and 8 F-22 Raptor fighters, and dozens of F-35 multi-role attack fighter jets, especially at military bases on the Polish-Russian border. The Polish government and the Polish people do not tolerate any excessive moves by Putin, and they always give him the necessary answer. In the past days after Russia's decision to annex 4 large regions in Ukraine, the Polish Carpet and Czech people gathered joint structures for the annexation of Russia's Kaliningrad region. Also this week, the Polish people gathered 9 million votes in the fake referendum for the transfer of the Russian embassy in Poland, which is considered Russian territory, to Poland. Again this week, another shocking statement came from Poland. This time, the Polish government suggested that the frozen assets of Russia, worth 350 billion euros, be used for Ukraine. This is definitely a fair trade-off. With Russia's attack on Ukraine, the number of people who have fled Ukraine since the invasion of Russian troops have exceeded 4 million, according to data released by the United Nations. With Russia's attack on Ukraine, the number of people who have fled Ukraine since the invasion of Russian troops has exceeded 4 million, according to data released by the United Nations. This means that 4 million people have been uprooted from their homes, families, and communities because of the war. The first stop of Ukrainian citizens who had to leave Ukraine was Poland, which is a border neighbor and NATO member. 90% of Ukrainian civilians fleeing the war were supported by Poland. With the settling of the Ukrainian refugees in Poland, this situation has become a financial burden for Poland. For this financial burden, the United States supported Poland with a cash aid of millions of dollars. Following the decline in U.S. cash aid to Poland, Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki spoke about this issue at an international conference in Warsaw. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki pushed the button to deal a hard blow to Putin, calling for the use of 350 billion euros worth of frozen Russian assets. The head of the Polish government spoke about the need to build a new security architecture to defeat the invading Russia. Morawiecki underlined that the world states cannot hide from Russian threats or ignore Russian capital. For this reason, Poland emphasized that it supports not only the freezing of Russian capital, but also its seizure and its allocation to the reconstruction of Ukraine, in which Polish enterprises will also be located. The Prime Minister of Poland stated that the country's government supports the proactive participation of Polish businesses in the reconstruction of war-torn Ukraine. The Prime Minister of Poland emphasized that in the new architecture of security, Polish and Polish entrepreneurs, who were in the first place to help Ukraine in its most difficult moments, which are not yet over, and after the end of the war, Polish and Polish entrepreneurs who will rebuild Ukraine according to the new Great Marshall Plan will be among them. In addition, since Poland is a member of the European Union, Morawiecki also mentioned that it's necessary to maintain positive energy on Ukraine's integration into the EU. He also reminded that thanks to the determined actions of the Polish government, Kiev received the status of a candidate for membership. Polish companies are contacting the Polish Investment and Trade Agency to develop Ukraine again. During the conference, Polish Minister of Development and Technology, Waldemar Buda, announced that 1,200 Polish companies had applied to the Polish Investment and Trade Agency regarding their willingness to participate in the reconstruction of Ukraine. The Polish minister stated that he believes that the participation of Polish companies in the process will be the most important thing, although other foreign enterprises, especially those from the U.S. and Germany, want to actively participate in the restoration of Ukraine. He also emphasized that Polish companies will take part in this process with cheaper costs. The Ukrainian government relies on using the seized Russian assets of the International Reserve Bank and Prominvest Bank in particular to rebuild civilian infrastructures destroyed by Russian attacks. As a result of this human migration that Poland is facing, additional shifts started in all branches of the Polish government. With an intense human migration to the territory of any country, governments need to spend a lot of time and create new laws to keep the process under control. After the immigration of Ukrainians, with the mobilization decision of Vladimir Putin, many Russian citizens who immigrated to Poland came to the fore. The number of Russians and Belarusians looking for work in Poland is increasing, which means that they somehow bypassed the restrictions that prevent free passage from their country to Poland. While the Polish government was in this process, the Ministry of Family and Social Policies repealed some regulations. The Ministry of Family and Social Policies stated that with the new regulations, it will be difficult for Russians to find a job in Poland. Tomasz Bogdewicz, CEO of Polish employment agency Gremi Personal, stated that this move is a very good and necessary move on behalf of the state, and he hopes these regulations will come into effect quickly. According to the latest confirmed data, 729,000 Ukrainians, 88,000 Belarusians, and 14,000 Russians are legally working in Poland. Based on 2020 data, the number of Belarusian citizens increased by about a third, and the number of Russians increased by 10,000. Family and Social Policies Minister Marlena Malag stated that the preferential seasonal work permits will no longer be granted to Russian citizens. Malag also stressed that he would not be affected by the simplified procedure for declarations of entrusting a job to a foreigner in Poland. After receiving top-notch information about the situation in the local labor market, Malag pointed out that Russian citizens already in Poland can benefit from temporary residence permits and work permits just like other foreign citizens. But Malag pointed out that the Russians who will benefit from these permits must have a certain level of qualification at a significant level. By taking appropriate steps to make the entry of Russians into the country more difficult, Poland prevented them from fleeing en masse before mobilization. But despite this, the increasing number of Russians who want to work in Poland after mobilization in Russia proves that the Russians fled to Poland for fear of being called into the army. Immediately after the start of the war between Ukraine and Russia, worldwide Russian sanctions began. Countries that found Russian President Vladimir Putin's war order unjustified by imposing heavy sanctions on Russia and Russian citizens showed which side they supported in the war. Especially Russian businessmen who do business with large investments around the world got their share from the sanctions that started as of February 24th. The United States of America, which is Ukraine's biggest supporter, is at the forefront of the countries that impose sanctions against Russia and Russian businessmen. After the United States' decision to impose sanctions, it implemented all the sanctions it could in the countries that supported this decision. The action of the European Union under the sanctions was to freeze the assets of Russian President Vladimir Putin and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Europe. At the same time, members of the government who made illegal decisions in Donetsk and Luhansk, banks, business people, and oligarchs who financially support or benefit Russian operations, and a total of 27 high-profile individuals and organizations that run disinformation campaigns were subject to sanctions imposed by the European Union. The biggest example of sanctions in the United Kingdom is that one of Putin's good friends and big supporters, Roman Abramovich, was cut off from Chelsea, one of the well-established clubs of the English Premier League. Abramovich, in front of the cameras, announced that he transferred his €1,875,000 club to the Chelsea Foundation. While all Russians began to be affected by the war that Putin started as a result of his personal ambitions, Ukrainian civilians were also affected by Russia's attacks. Poland's aim is to minimize damage by using the €350 billion in assets to rightfully rebuild what has been destroyed as the heaviest penalty to Putin. Let's hope such a fair move happens. Thanks for watching.